welcome back to another episode of Perspective Checks, where I sit down with friends and folks from the TTRPG community to talk about all the things we love, or hate, or drive us crazy, or just make us keep coming back for more with this TTRPG hobby that we all love and share. Today, I am joined by Matt, host of the Role Play Chat podcast, where he sits down with folks and talks about TTRPGs, improving his GMs and players, and more. This time, Matt, you get to be on the other side of the interview, so thanks for joining.
This is the easy part. I just get to sit back. You did all the hard work coming up with questions, and I just get to sit back and answer them. So I'm eager. Thank you, Rini, for having me on the show. I've been listening to a handful of episodes. You've had some cool guests on, so I hope I can live up to the expectation for sure.
I was saying this to my friends earlier. I was like, people keep saying yes to interviews. Like, it's just free publicity is always good, but like also like, am I maybe like, do people like think I'm good at this, or like
definitely you're definitely good at this. And I asked myself some of the same questions for roleplay chat.
Yeah,
and I think it's because I can only speak for myself, but I definitely don't get to talk about role playing games enough outside of the podcast.
Right.
So this is like an outlet for me to just let it all out so that I don't drive my wife crazy, like that's the
same. She's in the other room right now enjoying some nice, good alone binging time on TV.
There you go.
Kicks me out, goes, yeah, go do your thing. You're nerd.
That's too funny.
But yeah, and it's great, right? I think it's just that if you have that infectious enthusiasm about something, right? Or you find something that you share an enjoyment of with someone else, then it just comes naturally. You just slide right into that. We can talk about this stuff forever.
That's it. I'm sure if there wasn't like an optimal amount of time that a podcast should be, roleplay chat episodes would be like 5 hours long. So I'm glad there's at least some optimization that has to happen.
Nice and digestible, right? And I think that's honestly, like you said, little letting people behind the scenes here. I am, and people know this, a crazy organizer. So like before any interview, I do my best to like sit down and I bullet point like at least 4 or 5 like talking points related to the topic that I've discussed with the guest. So I give them a little heads up if they're the prepping type. And then I've had other people who just go like, didn't even look at your email. Let's roll and record. And I'm like, yeah, let's do that. But for me, it helps kind of structure the thing. And
definitely. I and the questions you sent me were great. So I'm really eager to dive in and get talking about games.
So before we get to those questions I prepped, we always ask the same 3 questions to start off all the interviews here on Perspective Checks episodes. So we got to do the starting 3, get to know you a little bit, Matt.
Let's do it.
The first one we always ask is, how long have you been playing TTRPGs or been around the hobby?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I've always been a nerd. That goes without saying. But
lifelong.
Lifelong. Came out of the womb rolling dice. No, not quite. But big Magic player, big board game player for a long time, and then it wasn't until university. So maybe I'm going to date myself a little bit, but so 2010 was when I had my first year of university, and that's when a friend of mine that I met at Frosh Week introduced me to Dungeons & Dragons. We played D&D 3.5. Shout out to Keith, who I've lost touch with, so there's no way Keith is going to hear this, unless there's some miraculous way that Keith
Can you imagine? Keith is a listener for sure, I know.
and as they say, the rest is history, so I played as a player for a little bit. It did not take me long to get behind a Game Master screen. Like, this idea of being able to share my creative outlets with other people and have them input into it was such a novel idea. And honestly, I don't think there's anything else quite like it. Even to this day that I've found that has that same level of intimate creativity. But anyway, I'm getting besides the point. I started DMing maybe 8-10 months after that. And, the rest is history.
Never look back.
Yeah, never look back.
Yeah, and actually, that kind of presages. I think that's the right way to use that word. You said something in there where, sharing that creative storytelling outlet, and that the fact that there's nothing like it is very true. And it I'm going to use that in a little bit about our topic that we've chosen to speak of today. But that's question number 3. So first we got to do question number 2, which is you started with 3.5, presumably like everyone else. As 5e came out, it was the absolute smash success that brought RPGs kind of to social periphery, right? Like out of the basement and like people might know about it kind of thing. And now with like Stranger Things and all these things, like D&D made RPGs approachable, or at least like in the cultural zeitgeist a little bit. What have you been playing lately?
Yeah, so I mean, I try to play as many games as I can, if I'm being honest. The tried and true is still D&D. You know, as much as I try to get away from it here and there, D&D is the game that always comes back. So I'm running a homebrew game that meets every other Sunday. And that's been going on now for a little over 2 years.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's been fun. It's a 5th edition game set in the homebrew world that I've created, but it's basically fantasy land. Like it's like nondescript fantasy land. And it's been fun to play that. And then, you know, aside from that, whenever I get the opportunity, I love running like one-shot systems. 10 Candles, I've had the opportunity to run twice. And I want to, like, I have a cottage weekend coming up with some friends, and I'm gearing myself up to run a game of 10 Candles then. And I've also been playing a lot of solo games. I love a good solo game. There's
Same.
one. Oh,
anybody listening to this podcast is like, yes, of course, Rainey, we know. So well, you could talk about the solo games you've been playing right now. Any stand out?
I'll quickly shout out 2 that I've recently played that I really enjoyed, that are small independent games. One is called Universe at Your Door, The Traveler, and this is a solo game by Lola Johnson. It's kind of like a sci-fi space exploration game where you're journaling entries as you travel through space, and you kind of discover new planets, alien life, and also do like some introspection about, you know, the people you miss back home or the challenges that you face through isolation and stuff like that. So it's kind of touches on that very self-reflective, introspective journaling game that a lot of solo games tend to be like. And then I also really enjoyed Mirror Lock Atelier's Galatea. So Galatea is a really neat game where you use tarot cards to tell the story of artistic creation that you play. You're like a sentient masterpiece.
Oh.
And it's about the relationship you have with your creator. And, you know, it quite literally felt like going to therapy. Like talking about your relationship with the person who raised you and brought you up. And
wow, yeah.
This expectation of being a masterpiece. It was really quite interesting.
That's cool. I'm going to add that to a list right now. Excuse me while I write that down. Galatea. Okay.
Yeah. I'll send you some details after if you'd like. It's fun. It's, you know, made by one person, an independent game. Gotta support the small creators out there for all the great stuff that D&D is doing. They're doing a lot of bad stuff too. So it's fun to kind of balance it out with some smaller creators, independent creators.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm actually working on a solo tarot game that's the other side of things. It is about you like receive a grant and you spend a year at like this like prestigious estate working on your masterpiece. And it has, this place has a history of being, one, extremely selective of who gets to go there for the year and like gets to live this out. And 2, pretty much everyone who goes there like makes their life's greatest work there, like hands down, no doubt about it. So it's like, why is this place pumping out perfect like things, right? Like, cool. Is it the people or is there something mysterious here?
Yeah, very fun. What's your timelines on that? Is that like near completion, or it's still in the hopper?
I wish. I'd say that one's at the 50 to 60% done range. I didn't realize how hard it was to come up with that many tarot prompts. That like I feel like prompt based games like that, when you're playing them, every question feels so dead on. You're like, how did they do this? And then like when I play test my own, I'm like, man, that question's you know, it's like I have to like go back to the drawing board and be like, I got to come up with a better one for that. But that might just be me being too self-critical.
I mean,
Anyway.
you're definitely right. It's impressive, like dozens and dozens of prompts, and each one often feels like this incredible self-reflection that you have to go through. And it's like, wow, I didn't think I had this in me to answer these, let alone come up with the questions. So
yeah, I'm convinced oracles are like actual magic. I don't know how it works. Either it's the prompt from like a card you flip in a game, or like I play a lot of Ironsworn on this channel, and like
nice.
That's literally two tables with just two words, and somehow you'll roll them and be like, oh my god, how does this make sense? And be like, I swear it's magic. It's not. It doesn't even make sense.
It's a beautiful thing.
So that actually transitions quite well, I think, into our topic for the day. So what are we going to be talking about today?
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about GM-less games, which,
yes,
like you were saying, telling stories, that shared narratives. I guess maybe I'll take back what I said about not finding a better way to do it. GM-less games are the better way to do it, in my opinion.
Yes,
but I guess they still fall in the TTRPG like umbrella.
Yeah, GM-less games have become like a favorite of mine. Obviously, I'm a forever GM. My streaming group, DMs After Dark, we started because we were just all forever DMs of D&D, and we were like, let's play other games, please. And we still play games where there's usually one of us running it, and sometimes that's just familiarity, and they're not really like GM'd games. But the opportunity to sit at a table where everyone sits down and no one has to put on that mantle and be like, I know things that you guys don't, and like a GM-less game is so fun because toss that out. We're all equally contributing to this story. It's just like mind blowing to see, you could have a clear set start and finish, which a lot of these do, but that in the middle gets wild because you're always going to have different perspectives pushing the narrative in different ways.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Did you have like a whoa moment, or do you remember your first GM-less game you played?
So when I was looking at your questionnaire, Rini, and I was coming up with this response, it was funny because I think I might have experienced, or I know I experienced GM-less games before even knowing that was like a subgenre of TTRPGs. And it was playing a game called Dawn of Worlds. Dawn of Worlds is a world building simulator that you play in one sitting. People come around a table and you go through like different epochs where first you're like geomorphing a continent, and then you're adding in civilizations, and then you enact conflict between those civilizations. And it's pretty well structured. Everybody has points that they spend to kind of play with the sandbox. And at the end of it, you have like a continent that you've all had a hand in creating. So I ran a game of Dawn of Worlds before a game that I was going to run. I basically had all my players come. We played this game, and I'm like, okay, now our campaign is going to take place here because we all are invested in this space. It was really cool. But I definitely wasn't looking at it from a perspective of like telling a shared narrative at that point. I was very much using it as an a means to an end, which was this way to get everybody invested in the setting that we were going to be playing in.
I think that's what GM-less games do best. I think that they make people invested, because as opposed to your beer and pretzels game where your friends just come over and you're sitting behind a DM screen playing D&D, and you tell your friends, like, they're just sitting there waiting until it's like, tell me when to roll initiative. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, or like, you know what I mean? Like, tell me when to roll a dice. Instead, like, they have to sit down at the table and be like, these things are happening. Like, you have to contribute to this. And then all of a sudden, just by the act of being like, asking a question, like, what do we think is a good thing to put here? And they chime in. Now, all of a sudden, not only was that their idea, but if you play, like, I love that, like world building games, city building games, those are great GM-less games, right? Because if you do use them as a springboard for a future game to play in that world you just made, everyone's invested. It's so clever and so smart, because not only if you're going to be playing a game that is GM'd, you have all those hooks that, like, your players care about, but also you don't even have to do the work. Like they already are coming in going, I want to check out this thing that like, I want to see what happens when we push on the thing that I made, or I really love this thing that they made. And like, I need to know more about that, you know?
Yeah,
Oh,
totally. And I think the beauty of it is that because of this sense of ownership, it kind of takes away, like you were saying, the barriers that exist for the players to like, I don't know that, like, I feel like in traditional tabletop role-playing games, there is very much this default ownership that falls on the game master. So players might be too timid to come up with some kind of idea about the history of a location or a character, whether that be the, a war hero or something. They might feel, unless like immediately prompted by the game master to do so, they might not volunteer that information, even though they're already kind of imagining this stuff,
and hoping for it. Right. And like, and honestly, if the GM was open to it, and again, like I run all of my games like this now, where like I tell people, I take kind of and I know this is kind of a pariah for multiple reasons of the PBTA world, but Dungeon World was like my big going into PBTA, play to find out, draw maps, leave blanks, like these
totally
concepts that just I will never turn around from. But like I play all my games now where it's like, if I'm playing a game and there's classes or there's like ancestries or what have you, or even if you're from like a certain country within the world or territory within the world, if there are any questions that come up about it, I might have ideas, but I'm going to ask that player and be like, your character's from here, or your character is this profession, or you know what I mean? Like, tell me something interesting about it that we can use right now.
Totally.
But like when you don't even have that role of a GM, and it really does just kind of say like, anybody throw this out there, and like you've been collectively building these little details, it's easy to build on those other things and tie in other stuff like without that permission, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Of a GM.
Exactly. And then I just to go back to your question, Rini, I think the first GM-less game that I played with the knowledge of it being GM-less was Fiasco. I don't know if you've ever played Fiasco, but Fiasco is so much
perfect
fun.
Chaos.
Yeah, exactly. It's chaotic. It's all about relationships. It's all about these characters and their interactions with one another. And it really, I can attribute a lot of my role play ability to that game. Like playing that game was, I think, a foundational building block of what role playing can be in any kind of tabletop role playing game. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it does a lot of like relationship webs. I like really wish I was better at it, but that game like really does just kind of go like, before you even start, you have to understand where all of these things start at the beginning, and they're going to evolve over time. And I actually thought of this. I didn't have this in my notes, my questions that I prompted to you, but I thought of it a better way to kind of describe it, at least in my mind, the way I think about sitting down at a table to play games with people, is that trad games, like traditional D&D like games, right, with a DM or GM, tend to have information in the hands of the GM, and the players have to ask them questions, right? They have to ask questions about like, would I know anything about this? What can you tell me? Like, what does he have? What does that symbol mean? Maybe you have to roll for it, or like, what do we know about the history of this, whatever, right? And they have to ask the DM, and the DM has to have answers prepared, or be like, hold on a moment, blah, 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 blah. But GM-less games, obviously, they ask the players questions instead of the players asking the GM questions. And just that switching of the, like how the game prompts you, it really has the players just drive the narrative forward by answering these questions. And they don't have to worry about a GM guiding them anywhere, because like they already know as a group, like as soon as they start talking through it, oh, I see where we want this to go. And everyone kind of like funnels and goes like, and these questions get more and more pointed towards the goal that everyone sees, the light at the end of the tunnel.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's a good feeling. It's for anybody listening who hasn't had the pleasure of experiencing a GM-less game yet, let this be your call to action to give one a try. I think too, it can be a little bit intimidating, right? You kind of get this sense of well, is it just going to be chaos if there's nobody who is the arbiter of this, who's who has this kind of referee jersey on to make sure that things move a certain way? But in my experience, most GM-less games do a really good job of establishing kind of like rails that enable you to tell a story within certain parameters. And I don't want to make it sound like it's restricting you, because really you're quite free to talk about and invent whatever kind of narratives you want in most cases. But it just gives enough structure that you never really feel lost.
Yeah.
And in fact, you almost feel, how do I explain this? It's almost like a weight is lifted off your shoulders, because you get to kind of rely on one another to tell these narratives together.
That's a great way to put it, right? It's like, if you feel like at any time, like, well, I don't know where this is supposed to go, you have at least one or two other people there who might be like, well, we could just make, like, the nice thing is we can just make it up. And I would counter, and I understand why some people might feel a little hesitant or be like, I don't know about this. Like, aren't we going to be a little lost? Let me counter with, in a GM-less game, nobody has to be the GM and do any prep.
Yeah,
that should take the stress right off your shoulders anyway. Well, like, cool. Like, save yourself time. One person just has to like briefly read through the rules so they know the general mechanics, and then you're good to go.
Yeah. Maybe before we keep going, Rene, I have one other caveat that
sure
I found myself when I was preparing my answers. I went down some rabbit holes, so I wanted to run this by you.
Excellent.
When we define GM-less games,
oh yeah,
we're talking about. I was going to be talking about collaborative GM-less games, as opposed to like technically a solo game. I suppose is also GM-less. So just to make sure that there's a line in my brain, I wanted to put that out there for your thoughts.
I actually had that as my next little note here that I didn't send to you because I thought about it after, and I was like, technically, solo games are GM-less, but yeah, I agree with you that it's not quite the same, right? Because in my opinion, a GM-less game has to be like a multiplayer game, right? Otherwise, like, just call it a solo game, right?
Yeah.
Because in a solo game, there's multiple roles, but like one player. But in a GM-less game, it's like there's one role and multiple players, and it's just player, right?
Yeah.
I
mean, wonder, like, now that we're talking about it, how the Venn diagrams overlap, and it might be an interesting dissection to do it another
pretty
time.
Big, probably. But, it's probably a pretty big overlap, but I think that GM-less games can do a lot that solo can't.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
Not that solo games can't do a lot, as anybody listening to this will know that I will attest to the wonder that is solo games. But I do think that like that collaborative aspect does get lost, and like solo games try and replace that with things like oracles, so that way you're not just tasked with like coming up with all these details. You can always roll something random to get little keywords or prompts or something like that will throw a wrench or a curveball at you. But it's not the same as somebody else saying, oh, I like that idea, and asking a question on top of it that makes you rethink everything you just said. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. The sense of like iteration can't be compared. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
I think it's interesting. Normally, you're right. I didn't even write down, and this is usually a gimme for me. Can we define it? But I think that it's almost too big of an umbrella, kind of like TTRPGs in general, right? I mean, like, you're sitting down at a table, and a TTRPG can be anything. It can be a very on rails experience. Like, a lot of people would argue that like a lot of Jason Morningstar's LARP stuff straddles the line between LARP and TTRPG and like parlor game. Kind of all the same, right? Maybe not dice mechanics. And then on the hard other side of it, like, there are like borderline war mini games, right? Tactical like miniatures games that you could totally argue are a TTRPG. It's in some respects. So GM-less games can kind of, span that enormous gap as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's in the name, like we could dig forever, but the simplest and most efficient way to look at it is it's a game with no game master. You're playing a tabletop role-playing game. There's no game master, but there's still a group of folks around a table, virtual or not, telling stories.
Storytelling socialism is GMless games. Yeah, that's great. We kind of have a pseudo secondary topic to talk about within this, and I guess, which relates to a game that you are going to be putting out soon. I can't believe we've made it this far without bringing it up. Do you want to talk about the game you're designing first, or do you want to talk about the sub category of what it is?
I mean, maybe I'll try to get both birds in with one stone.
Nice. Yeah.
And then we can dissect the secondary topic. So yeah, the secondary topic is a romance in games. And I think, wait, I'm not going to go down that hole yet. The game that I'm making that's coming out this summer, in August, if all my timelines work out, is called The First Date Update. And it is a GM-less game. It's a no prep, short form improv tabletop role playing game where you and a group of friends, anywhere between 3 to 6 people, pretend to go on a first date and then ghost each other. And the game is essentially this like gossip around a group of friends as they talk to one another about the first date. Like, oh, how did it go? Did it go well? Yeah. Why do you think they ghosted you? All the way, and you kind of play it out to the point where you get the ghost and the initiator to confront one another about why they ghosted them in the first place, and see if you can maybe convince them to go on a second date together. So it's kind of like this silly little romance game where you just kind of use prompts, flip coins to help you decide the outcomes of what went wrong or right about the date. And, usually hilarity kind of ensues afterwards.
It's so funny. So I did an episode on romance, and like my take on it, in one of my mining medias back in February, because Valentine's Day. And romance at the table is always an interesting thing to broach, right? Especially because it depends on what kind of game you're playing it in, all this stuff. But before we dive into romance at the table as a topic, because we'll have plenty to talk about there, I just want to real quick talk about the advanced reader copy you sent me of First Date Update, and some of the things that I was like, let me just give you some of my first thoughts. You're getting live here in the interview, right? One of my biggest pet peeves in movies, especially like rom-coms, because my wife and I do a lot of movie binging, and like we have like a weekly movie night thing, is watching a like 90+ minute movie and being halfway through it and being like, all of this drama could have been avoided if these people just talked it through like adults, right?
Absolutely.
The whole plot, if they just talked, right? And I love that your game intentionally uses mutual friends, right, to try and play up these scenes where maybe misunderstandings or perceived moments that might not have gone as planned can be explained and not justified, but like, clarified through mutual friends. And then you also get those really nice scenes where, like, in all these movies, I'm a huge fan, and this is my GM advice to everyone all the time, is like, if you have a group of players, my favorite thing in TV shows is when you have like a core 4 or whatever, right? Like 3-man band, whatever it is. The interesting thing is how they work as a team. But then whenever you get those scenes where you split that team up and you get the interaction between every combination of those that you can get, those are really interesting scenes where like 2 people are going to act very different if it's just the 2 of them than they do when it's 4 of them, right? Because they have different places, dynamics in the relationships, right? So I love this idea of the mutuals, the initiator, the ghost. Like there's like a back and forth. You kind of get to go on either side, and you can play like this game of almost telephone gossip kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so fun. Yeah, I can see very funny things happening here. And you even recommend stretch the truth mutuals. You know what I mean? Like, hey, like if halfway through this, you're like, I do want them to have a second date, like play it up, like, play wingman. Or like, you can be like, dish the goss, right? Like when you get back to the ghost and you're like, I can't believe he did that thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. It really is an intentional decision, right? To allow people playing the game to lean in on certain elements of what gets said, to basically gossip. Like you're basically gossiping with your friends about scenarios that never happened, but you're making them up as they arise.
Yeah.
And you can take it as seriously as you want, or as ridiculous as you want, you know? Sorry.
And the GM-less gold of it, of like having any one person at any time just being like, I'm just going to slide in this like bombshell, just like joke. You know what I mean? Like could just totally derail and make the funniest part of this whole thing, where like nobody saw it coming and everyone has to just be like, okay, all right, we're rolling with that right there. You know?
Yeah. We were doing a playtest not too long ago, and to kind of explain a little bit about what Rini just mentioned, there's the part of the game where you get to hand one another these action cards that basically dictate something that your character has to do or say or act out. And we got one where the action card said, pretend to have a heart attack to get out of answering the question. Basically.
Oh my
like, so, you know, the person who got this was sitting on it, waiting for the right opportunity, and then had this whole moment. And the funniest part was that it was already decided that these two had to achieve a second date. So, you know, like it threw this wrench in that just everyone was laughing like crazy. And then to try to then build it back up to a scenario where that was like an okay thing for that person to be doing.
How do you swing that, right?
Yeah. It was just ridiculous.
Yeah. So one other thing that I really like as I read this was that technically, I mean, like you do have the final confrontation, right? Where the initiator and the ghost are going to have another face-to-face, have to have a conversation, and the mutuals are trying to figure out, are we going to get them to go on a second date or not? And at the very least, you either get like closure or potential, right? Like maybe. Mm-hmm. But I like that nowhere in this game that is very romance coded do you necessarily have to portray romance or flirt. Like it doesn't explicitly say like, you know, you have to do these things, because that might not be comfortable for anybody at the table. You're just talking about the details of the date. You can play with it kind of zoomed out, not in characters, right? So it's a good way to approach it by starting so far back. There are going to be certain friend groups who pick up and play this game that are not afraid of sitting across the table from one another and just like flirting hard. And that's going to make that game very funny, you know, like it's going to be really fun. But you don't like the fact that you don't have to, and you wrote it intentionally to kind of keep that buffer up. I really appreciate it, because that's one of the tough parts of romance in games.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I know first and foremost that was going to be one of my objectives in making this game is make a game that can broach the topic of romance with, like you're saying, technically not at one moment in the game do two people have to flirt with each other or imply anything has happened. And the way that I tried to make that happen, I think, is just general advice that can be applied in all contexts for running romance in games, is that it's always easier to talk about something that has happened as opposed to playing out something that is happening. So in the context of the first date update, you're not actually acting out the first date. You're talking about it. You're saying, this is what I think went well. This is what I think went wrong. This is where I think the ghost, you know, saw something that they didn't like or what have you. So you're still talking about romance, but you're talking about it in the past as opposed to like acting it out actively currently. Another thing too is the mutuals play a really big role here in acting as this buffer. In most contexts, you're not going to openly flirt with somebody if there's like 2 or 3 other people sitting in the room kind of like trying to get gossip out of you, right? So they play this intentional buffer of, at first they like physically separate out the two characters. So the ghost and the initiator don't actually interact till the very end. So again, it allows this kind of separation to kind of enable the game to be played without going into uncomfortable situations. And then the last thing that I think can kind of be added to this in all kinds of contexts is gamifying certain elements of the romance. So having these cards that come into play that say, okay, now you have to act this way, by separating out the fact that it was you who decided versus, oh, I was dictated that I have to act this way. It kind of makes it easier to, it gives you permission to kind of like maybe be a little mean to the other person because, oh, the card said like, oh, I got to be an asshole right now or whatnot. So having these cue cards to kind of gamify the romance is something that I think you can do in all contexts, or like flipping coins to determine the outcome.
Yeah.
Enables you to work towards a common objective. So you're telling the story together about two people seeking a connection, but you know where the end goal is. So you're not fighting one another the whole time just to decide where that objective needs to be. It's told. Everyone knows where you're going, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point, right? Where leaving it up to cards that either you or others are writing down to kind of hand around, it separates you from the character, right? So like, you don't have to worry about like someone's judging me for like how I'm acting, even though no one at the table thinks it's you, right? I mean, like, you're playing a character in this made up scenario, but it's another kind of separation between your actions and you as a person, right? Like, it's this character did this thing because this card says so. How are we going to get past this? Or what does this mean for the moment? And that brings up something interesting that GM-less games, I think, are inherently, it's an important thing to talk about with GM-less games, and also is a big thing with romance. So this kind of works double duty here, which is that without a GM in a game who is there to arbitrarily kind of be like, stop, this is the rule, or like, obviously safety tools are another way to do this, but I'm saying in GM-less games, when you give more people authorial control over the narrative, there is a certain amount of trust that needs to be there that might not be there when you have a GM people can just point to and be like, this guy's doing something out of line, you know what I mean? And the GM can shut it down. It's for everyone at the table to be like, we're playing, we have a shared understanding. We've come up with like at least semi-coherent, like you said, like the box, right? Like we know the bounds within which we are playing, right? So if someone came and put like an absurd thing on one of these index cards, you kind of look at them and go, this is not within the spirit of the game, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So like you can always hang your hat on, this is what the card said, but you also in a GM-less game need to develop that kind of, here's our boundaries, yes, we can all put in whatever we want, whenever we want, but within reason.
Yeah.
And when
absolutely.
romance is involved.
And I think you're touching on a really core component of role-playing games, generally speaking, is this element of trust that the people playing the game have to have with one another, right? So in a GM-less game, it gets elevated to the nth degree because, again, there isn't this arbiter to say, no, that's, we're not going there, we're going to fade to black or whatever. And maybe it's just the people I've played GM-less games with, but I feel like this communal ownership of everyone's safety kind of like, not that it weighs heavy on the players, but the things that you say and the things that you do, because everyone is the game master. Really, a GM-less game is just we're all game masters.
full game.
Yes. So again, maybe it's just the people I've played these games with, so I don't want people taking this out of context listening, but usually if you have that safety conversation ahead of time, you say, hey, these are my no-go zones. I don't want to talk about X, Y, or Z. People, hopefully, that you're playing these games with are going to respect that, right? And because everyone has this stake in the story, they're going to be respectful and take that responsibility with pride, to make sure that you don't go there. One way that I tried to, like you're saying, in First Aid Update, you can technically write whatever you want in these action cards. But thankfully, I add a filter where the action cards go to the mutuals. The mutuals are the ones that get to decide when and where to use these cards, if at all. So if at least it's going through a couple of layers of filter where the ghost is writing them out. Hopefully they weren't mean and they put in fun and good spirited things. But then when they get to the mutuals get to play that line of defense as well. If they see something and they're like, oh, this was in the no-go zones. They shouldn't be putting it out there for someone to do, But again, hopefully people listening aren't playing games with people that make you feel bad. Like that's not the point of a role-playing game.
I have to, and like I said the same thing. I forget who I was talking to. I had a conversation recently and it was like about these, the community. I'd love to believe that the wider community of TTRPG folks is like the people I get to play with all the time, right? Like, have I curated my friends list that I play TTRPGs with? No. And like that, what I mean? Like I play with people all the time, online, in person, all this stuff. And they're friends from my real life, friends I've met through TTRPGs, all this stuff. And have I had experiences where I'm like, that was a little uncomfortable at the table? Absolutely. Right. So, I always try and couch everything with like, unfortunately, there are bad apples out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also agree with your assessment that in GM-less games, it's almost funny how it's counterintuitive that by removing the GM, who people assume has the responsibility of wrangling all these cats, right? The players at the table. Instead of removing responsibility, what it does is it spreads that responsibility among all of the players, right? And you'd hope that for the most part, players are going to sit down and take on that responsibility to ensure that the collaboration aspect of this is treated with the respect it deserves. So
absolutely. And I think in the context of romance, it's especially important, right? Like this is often when you're playing a game and you're filling out a lines and veils document, it's often an element of the game that people feel uncomfortable with, whether that be having a sex scene or having a flirtatious scene or things like this. People will often, in my experience, highlight that as something that they either don't want happening, or maybe if it happens, it's one of these fade to black moments, things like this. So I think for that reason, in my circles, in the games that I've played in, romance often doesn't really come up because it's this topic that it's just easier to avoid.
Yeah.
They put fade to black, but that still requires some navigation. Let's just not have it at all. And I think it's a bit of a shame because romance really is like one of the oldest and greatest storytelling components, right? You look back at all the old stories that are so instrumental to what stories are now. Romance is almost always a part of it. And if you think about like its versatility, it's such a cool thing. Like there's no setting specific to romance. There's no age period specific to romance. There's no default genre or anything. Like it's just this like layer that you can add in to just about anything. And I feel like, and sorry, I'm going a little bit on
I think this is a very good point. No, this is an incredibly good point to make because like you said, whether, obviously there is a romance genre, right? Of like books absolutely. And TV and all this stuff, but like there's almost always a romance subplot in like every kind of media you engage with, like almost always. Like Disney movies have romance subplots, you know what I mean? Like, and they don't have to be this uncomfortable thing that people are worried about going wrong at the table.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
In my opinion, some of the most incredible set pieces for romance at the table. Again, if you're thinking about including this, and I'm surprised I didn't talk about this and think about this, the most interesting part of romance subplots is never the payoff. It's not. That is the end. And it's like, okay, and now we're done. It's the miscommunications. It's the missed opportunities. It's the, you know what I mean? It's the, I want to, but I can't, right? Like there's a whole game, Star-Crossed by what is it? Alex Roberts, which is a Jenga tower. It's about the suspense of like the will they, won't they, right? Like the not acting on it is the juice. Like that is that is the romance, right? And play those scenes up. Don't go straight to the, and then this happened, fade to black. Like, that's not the interesting part. That's not the interesting part at all, right? Give them a reason they can't.
That's it.
And I love, first day update from the little I've seen of it, like the little I read through it today. It's like, one, I love the part you brought up earlier about talking about it in the past tense is so much easier than acting it out in the present. Keeps that buffer of that romance. And also, the whole game is hinging on like, what went wrong? Like, why wouldn't they? Why didn't they? What happened? Like, why are you ghosting? And that's like, and you're getting to this. And again, it's not, and again, I love this. There's not a payoff. The end doesn't say, and they kiss and ride into the sunset. It's, are they even going to get a second date? Because like, give it a chance, right? Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. You brought up a great point.
Thank you. I appreciate the positive feedback. It's nice to hear that some of the things that I tried to do kind of like made sense.
Came across. Yeah. Oh, good. It came across. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I hate to keep talking about this, but I want to add one other element here, if that's okay, Rini. And
please.
It's that the overlap when you look at the ingredients that make for a good romance narrative and the ingredients for any kind of narrative rich role-playing game. Mm-hmm. There is so much overlap that already exists that you're almost doing yourself a disservice by not including, like you're saying, the song and dance of will they, won't they, right? When you think about exploring character emotions, that's something that we often do at my table where it's like there was a big fight, someone almost died. How do we feel about that? That also is something that happens in a romance plot. This vulnerability and displaying this level of vulnerability is something that one does when they are trying to be romantic with somebody or initiate something with them. But it's also something that's going to happen inevitably in any good game of tabletop, right? There's going to be a moment where somebody is at their worst moment and they need help getting out of it. So again, there's that layer of vulnerability. Overcoming obstacles is something that, again, finds itself in both of these worlds. Themes of growth and character development, like it's almost like we're looking at the same grocery list, So
yeah, you can frame anything in even your heroic fantasy RPGs, right? In this context, right? Like if somebody helped you achieve something you've been struggling to achieve your own, it doesn't have to be these moments of being at your lowest or being vulnerable for a moment or anything like that. It can be like you see them in an entirely new way now because they went on a limb to help you. Like, how does your relationship develop? And you're right. It's so funny that, I recommend all the time. And again, I wish I was better at them, but relationship mapping is so interesting. Like, again, we're talking GM-less games, and games like Fiasco do this. Totally. But at the same time, and you can do this at a lot of GM-less games, but even in GM'd games, if you are the GM, or even if you're a player, actually, I've never thought of this, but I think I might start doing this. Kind of write down all of the other people you're playing with, or NPCs. How's your character feel about them? Track that over time, right? Certain actions might, think about it like those video games. What is it? I guess it's kind of hidden in a lot of games. Like there's like a, like how do they feel about your meter?
A relationship tree or whatever. Yeah. Reputation score.
Yeah. So I think in Baldur's Gate 3, it's like a hidden thing actually, where like you're not sure. I mean, obviously, when you're working towards the romance things of that.
Yeah.
But then also Persona games, like the more time you spend with people, the more that your rank is going to go up with them. And think about how that feeling changes, right? Like ask, like, not just I'm in a party traveling with this person every day. This person did this thing. Like, how does that make me feel about them? Does that change how I feel about them? Are you developing that relationship in an interesting way? And you're right to gate and say, we don't talk about these things, like this core human emotion. We just don't do it at this table. Go back and slaughter more things. You know what I mean? Like it is kind of unfortunate. There are reasons that within the community,
right? Like I'm not here. I hope people here listening to this aren't feeling called out. Like if it truly makes you feel uncomfortable and it's a no-go zone for you, It's absolutely fine. But I think what I may be trying to say is that if there is room for gray, if there is this opportunity to maybe explore a little bit of like player character to NPC hand-holding and romance and that kind of like back and forth initiation type stuff, I think it's a really fun part of the game that if you don't go and explore that, you're kind of holding yourself back. You're preventing yourself from enjoying something that might be actually a lot easier than you think to incorporate into your game. And like Rini said, you shouldn't be jumping right to the end, right? That's not the fun part.
Yeah, and the details of it, right? I mean, like, you don't have to describe those, right? Like, because what should feel the best is like finally taking that step closer, right? Like, it's, and making that progress.
Sorry, Rini, something that you talked about, like this relationship tree in Fiasco, that's something that I do at the start of every game. It's part of my session 0. When I have a new table of people, we have characters, I implore everybody to have at least one positive relationship with another character and one, I mean, calling it a negative relationship is too heavy, but kind of like that, like antagonistic coworker that you don't really like having lunch with, that kind of energy. So come up with a little story together, add it into your character backgrounds, and now we have this springboard for roleplay. So it's definitely, and it doesn't even have to be no romance related things necessary here. Just relationships. I loved the time that we went and hunted that boar together, and it was a fun memory for me. And it was great that me and Timothy did this thing. Like, we're buddies now because of that. Boom. That's your relationship with Timothy. And then you have this other thing where, Charles always burns the stew, and I'm always hungry, and I hate that he always burns the stew. I will never forgive him. Like, I'll never trust him to cook a meal for me again. There you go. You've got 2 harmless, silly roleplay springboards for you to go with.
Yeah, and I highly recommend. I love that idea. I almost think about it like modifiers in a traditional game, right? Like, I have a -1 with this person because they just get on my nerves sometimes or whatever. Like, they get us into more trouble than they get us out of. And I have a +3 with this person because, like, we are the best of friends. Do you know what I mean? And what's fun about that is you can have a +3 with that person, and that person can have a +1 with you and be like, yeah, they're nice. They're a little clingy. You know what I mean? And like that's a really interesting dynamic, right? And
Absolutely.
You don't even have to you don't have to make a subsystem for it. You don't have to have strings like in Monster Hearts or anything like that. You don't, they don't have to be romantic, but like just starting to think about it in that context opens the door towards, at what point does this maybe change into like, do I feel more than that for this person? And then, yeah.
And I'm sorry, I keep rambling. You got to stop me, Rainey.
By all means,
to stop. But I think there's a fun part of romance when you explore that vulnerability element too, right? Like,
yes,
all of the most dramatic moments, or not all, but a lot of very dramatic moments, funny moments, embarrassing moments, wholesome moments can come from this position of vulnerability. So if you put your character into a position of vulnerability, might feel a little bit uncomfortable, and you always have the eject button of humor to get you out of it. If you or anybody else at the table feels a little bit uncomfortable, you push the humor button, and then you're shot out of the uncomfortable situation. Or if you're okay kind of sitting in that discomfort a little bit, you can kind of get one of these really wholesome moments of a character admitting something that maybe they're ashamed of, or them tapping into an emotion that they don't usually show around the others because they're the strong one and they have to be the frontliner, and them wanting to share a blanket by the fire because they're cold just becomes this like really endearing moment, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
Anyways.
No, I agree. I actually, I've been like racking my brain as to like the number of times I've had like romance subplots in games, and I like to explore them, but again, like I like to play up the getting there, and once you're there, like we can whatever. I think one of my favorite ones is in all things a Starfinder campaign I was running one time.
Okay, cool.
And one of my players was like, he made his backstory like one of the kids who fell through the cracks in like the galactic whatever, and like kind of just like had to always fend for himself and all this stuff. And the characters like found themselves on this planet, and it was like a single mom and a kid, and this kid like didn't have any like dad figure, and like he wasn't playing like an old PC, but he was just like, I'm gonna just hang out with this kid. And then like I was like, well, the mom would be like really appreciative of that, like thank you for like showing my kid how to be safe or like do whatever. And like that was like throughout that whole book of that AP, it was just like it was the interactions they were having where like it was just them being like, I like spending time around each other, right? And like there was never any kind of like overt romantic gestures or anything like that. But then by the end of it, we were just like, hey, you're gonna have to leave this planet and like go somewhere else. And like that's when they had like their embrace, because it was like he was like, I'm coming back when this is all done. And we were like, that was the moment. It wasn't any of this like sappy or like like spicy or anything like that. It was just like this connection was made, and like and you can't erase that. And that's I was awesome. Like, of all the games to find this in, like it was like, okay, sure.
Yeah, that sounds great. And you know what, like that's kind of the respite that you can have when you have this connection of characters, because let's be honest, grimdark games, gritty games, a lot of people really enjoy that genre. I mean, I enjoy that genre. I think it's a really, really fun, low magic, Dark Souls-esque type stuff. But when you boil it down, again, the characters in these games are individuals who are going to crave connection. They're going to crave finding common ground with another sentient being that's, doing this adventure with them. So it doesn't have to be romance. It can just be connection. And I think that's, halfway there already.
And okay, we're going to segue to closing questions soon, but I do want to say I had one other note that I added to here, because I went back to my romance episode and I was like, what did I talk about? I don't want to like rehash a bunch of stuff, but one of the things I said in that, and I was like, oh, write this down again somewhere big, bold, is that I was reading like books about like TTRPG books. I was like, anything I could find that had like advice on running romance. And one game had like NPC romance. And I was like, why on earth would you even write up a section on this? Like, it seems like, again, like that seems like a GM just being like, I spent time writing and you have to deal with it. But the more I thought about it, I love this, because you can have your characters play matchmaker. And part of me really likes First Date Update as a way to slot this into a game.
Oh,
where like if
you have to do it now, really. You have to do it.
if they're playing in a home base kind of setting, or they're like spending a good amount of time in a city and they meet these NPCs, you can be like, one day you just go like, put away your character sheets. You're playing this NPC you guys met. You're playing this other NPC you guys met. And like they had a date. And then like you interacted with them after it. And like now you guys are going to play the mutuals.
Yeah, that would be so
like,
much fun.
And like I just feel like that's such a fun way to approach it. Because again, there's that buffer, there's that separation of like, this isn't your characters. Like we don't have the stress or pressure of that. It's kind of just a fun, I don't know. The more I think about it, I'm like, I need to shoehorn this into a game.
Man, I would love it. And I'd love to hear how it works out.
Yeah,
but
I'll let you know.
Yeah, but I love that idea. Using First Date Update aside, I think that's a really interesting and fun way to get your players invested in these NPCs. It's a really fun way to kind of flesh out NPCs. Because, I mean, let's be honest, I'm sure you're like me. You have too many NPCs to know what to do with, and half of them have like a sentence of personality, and that's about
it. If that.
Yeah. So enabling this like matchmaker episode to happen could be a really fun change of pace to the game.
Yeah.
Could be a really fun way to get them invested in these characters and not worry about the consequences, because I think that is something that players are going to feel like, oh, I don't want to romance this other character, or I don't want to do something that might turn around, and if we break up, now what do I have? I don't want to deal with that. Or so there might be a little bit of that, but if you abstract them and give them NPCs to do it with, that's an A+ idea. I think that's a lot of fun.
I try. All right. that's a perfect place to segue to closing questions. And we've given a lot of advice in this episode. We've talked a lot about this, but I always end. This is one of my favorite questions I ask because I never know how much people are willing to throw on the listeners here. But do you have any last bits of wisdom, advice, or homework for the listeners?
Well, I mean, I didn't really think up homework, but I do want to encourage people listening, if you haven't explored a GM-less game and or romance in a game, assuming you're comfortable with either or of those things, let this be your call to action to do that. You know, go try a simple GM-less game. It could be one of the ones we talked about, or look up a list of some of the most interesting and fun GM-less games that are out there, and give it a go. You know, it's not as intimidating as it looks. 9 times out of 10, the GM-less game is very simple and can be run, you know, as you're reading the rulebook. Usually doesn't take up a lot of your time. Anywhere between an hour to 3 is usually the kind of the range for these things. So that's your homework. Go try a GM-less game, and maybe consider romance in your adventures.
Yeah. And you know what? At the very least, tally up your, how do I feel about these other characters? And now recontextualize what you might think about those relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. I'm like that might be a mainstay in my campaigns now. All right. Second question for closing questions is, are there any games you really want to play, or any ideas you really want to get and use at the table?
Well, I want to play one of your NPCs in your dating sim.
Yeah, I'll throw out a few ideas from my ongoing games. I'll be like, who could we ship? It's like shipping, right? Like, and that's the nice about it, using it within a campaign. The game in a game, you can ship NPCs.
Absolutely. But no, I think, I mean, talking about Fiasco is something that I haven't played Fiasco in a very long time. So maybe I'm going to circle back and give Fiasco a try. I really liked this idea of interconnected webs of relationships. I'm wondering now if there's a way to GM-less gamify that web of interactions, because I mean, I don't want to go too long down another rabbit hole here, Rini, but I think that there's value in establishing parameters for how those relationships are collectively with the people that are playing it, right? So maybe there'd be a fun way to kind of make like a table where you have each character, you write down kind of a relationship status for each of them, friendly, not friendly, what have you. And if you gamify it, it essentially gives permission to the players to act that way, right? It's not like, oh, I'm just deciding this on my own. No, we decided this as a table that character 1 and character 2 kind of like can't stand each other or whatever it is. So you kind of have this permission to role play and for it to grow into a more positive or possibly more negative relationship. But anyway, yeah.
No, I love this. Honestly, this is what happens a lot when I talk to people who, especially when we talk about like games people have like been designing or like thoughts that have been on people's brains. I always end an interview and I'm talking to them and something comes up that I go like, oh, I got to write this idea down. And like whether or not it becomes a game or a supplement or something, you know what I mean? Like, cause yeah, like you could do this in multiple different ways, right? Where you're like, it could just be something as simple as pluses and minuses and keeping score on like a sliding scale. But if you almost like matrix it, right? Where like you have like a table, people love their, what is it? The axis of alignments in D&D, right? Like
That's
lawful chaotic. So imagine starting in the middle and it's just like I feel true neutral about this person. And then you go like up and down as one axis and left and right as another. You can, not that seems like a lot of work, but at the same time, it seems like an easy enough tool to just be like, here's your character sheet. Here's your relationship map. You know what I mean? Like, interesting. I could, you know what I mean?
Yeah, could be something worth exploring for sure.
Yeah, we're gonna get off this call. We're gonna start like messaging one another back and forth. Okay, so I drew this thing up. I think this is neat. All right. Well, so we can listeners. We got to go get started on our relationship mapping tool for everybody to use at their tables. So, Matt, why don't you tell people what you want to pitch and where they can find you on the internet?
Absolutely. Well, before I do that, thank you, Rini, for having me on. This has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you about GMless
Pleasure
games.
is all mine.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. If people are still listening to me ramble at this point into the episode, you probably want to listen to me ramble some more. So come find me at roll_play_chat on Blue Sky, on Threads, on Instagram. I'm pretty sure my X account is still active, but I literally never check it anymore. Or, if you want to just talk to me about games, have an email address, you don't want to be limited to character limits, contact roleplaychat@gmail.com. That's where you can find me. As far as things to plug, I have my podcast that's not too dissimilar to this conversation here. So if you like these kinds of philosophical conversations about games, Role Play Chat is available wherever you listen to podcasts. I've had all sorts of really fun folks join me on the show. Maybe Rini will come and join me one of these days soon to talk about who knows what. You'll have to listen in to find out. And then, of course, First Date Update. If anything we talked about today sounded interesting to you, if you want to play this very short form role-playing games where you get to have silly moments, pretend to ghost your friends, pretend to confront them about it, and just kind of laugh away silly, vulnerable situations, First Date Update is a game for you. It requires no prep. Every quote unquote game or round of First Date Update takes about half an hour at most. So it's not, something that requires too much preparation to kind of amp people up to do. And it's going to be available to purchase on itch, on drive-thru, and any of those other outlets at some point this summer. I'm aiming for August. So kind of stay tuned for that. I'll have some physical copies that I'm going to print out too and maybe send to some vendors at cons and stuff.
Ooh, nice.
I haven't quite figured out the logistics of all of that yet.
I know I've dipped my toe in the design sphere of games, and I'm always like, it'd be so cool to have like a physical copy of this, but then I'm like, I don't even know where to begin with that. So, but yes, when this comes out, I will be sure to be linking all of that stuff. And if First Date Update is out by the time this goes up, there will be a link to it. If not, we will share it when it goes live. And yeah, looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Renee. It's been a blast.
Thank you. And as always, thank you for listening to another episode of Perspective Checks. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Matt about GMless games, bringing romance to your table, and maybe you should go check out his new game, First Date Update, which will be linked in the description. Small update, since we recorded this, we have chatted a little bit about that relationship matrix mapping kind of GMless tool for any game that you may be playing if you want to track how you're feeling about certain other PCs in your party or NPCs out in the world that you play in. We're working on it, and hopefully it shouldn't be too crazy to finish up and design and make nice looking so we can get it out there for people to use at their tables. If you like what I'm doing here, follow me on the social medias. You can always email me at rainyplaysgamespod@gmail.com if you want to be on an episode of Perspective Checks to talk about something you're into in the TTRPG hobby. If you have games that you'd like to hear me play on this channel, maybe you can pitch them to me and I can find the time to slot it in somewhere. Anything like that, just say hi. If you haven't already, leave a rating and review on your podcatcher of choice. Just helps make my podcast pop up for more people in their apps that they use, which just grows the following and the community around this little nerdy channel and everything like that even more, which, speaking of, you should join the DMs After Dark Discord so we can all hang out and chat more. We're always in there just kind of talking games, talking life, talking anything. If you feel obscenely generous, I do have a Ko-fi page somewhere, but it just covers the cost of podcast hosting and the software that I use to do interviews and transcribe these episodes. So if you felt incredibly generous, it would mean a whole lot if you could help cover those costs, but no pressure whatsoever. And that's that. So until next time, go try a GMless game and maybe think about trying out a little romance subplot next time.